Portal isn't about portals. That's right, the game known for and named after the mechanic of traveling through portals in order to solve puzzles was never about that. Well, puzzles and portals were certainly involved, but not in the way you might think. Yes, I'm indeed claiming that everything, from the moment you wake up in the test chamber to opening your eyes again at the end to see who be the who pay you a visit in the outside world, was predetermined. That's right, you were never in full control and nothing that you did happened because you wanted it to. Neither your actions during the tests nor your eventual escape from Aperture. You were just a puppet being fed lies and distractions to make you believe that you were somehow rising up against a rogue AI gone mad, but were instead following a script that you didn't even know was being written for you long in advance. However, I'd also like to argue that it might not have been done with any ill intentions in mind. My theory is that GLaDOS never wanted to test your abilities to solve basic cube and button puzzles using the portal gun, but that she was instead testing you in several other, less obvious ways, some of them for the sake of science, and some for Chell's benefit. Before I begin though, here's something important to note. This theory is only taking Portal 1 as a standalone experience into consideration, and not as a prequel to Portal 2. The reason for this is that a lot of aspects that I will talk about got retconned in the sequel. However, I feel it's fair to analyze a piece of media by itself and consider the possible original intentions for it before they were changed in later titles. Much like Half-Life 1 compared to Half-Life 2, Portal 1 gives off extremely different vibes than its successor, with an atmosphere and lore that I honestly prefer. It just feels like there are many mysteries and questions left to be answered, some of which do get resolved in Portal 2, but some of them don't. Take this into consideration and please don't write any comments about how this or that was actually subverted in the sequel. Valve didn't even know there would be more than one Portal game when they made it, so of course it's not possible that they were able to address things that hadn't even happened yet. But now, let's dive into how the real tests of Portal 1 were never about thinking with portals, but about something entirely different. It would be one thing to drop a test subject into a test chamber and expect them to solve puzzles based on the resources given to them. Sure, a few instructions here and there to ensure that they know what they're doing are necessary, but what isn't required is a constant barrage of narration from an unseen voice. GLaDOS. The voice of reason, or unreason rather, which not only accompanies you throughout the entire game, but also serves as a source of the true tests being conducted. Namely, her vocal presence allows for her to psychologically mess with her subjects in various ways. Firstly, by making them feel unimportant and inadequate. The player gets dropped into a clinical and nondescript glass cube with no fanfare, and afterwards never gets formally addressed either. Complimented from time to time, sure, but no names ever get dropped. And even when she is supposed to, GLaDOS doesn't load your personal data, instead leaving in placeholder text, as if you aren't even worth changing a few lines of code around for. So the test subject feels like a nameless lab rat, dropped into a maze to find the cheese at the end. But that alone wouldn't be enough to serve as valuable data, especially when public schools achieve the same result. Instead, you are also made to feel incredibly concerned about your own health and safety. GLaDOS will continuously point out the dangers of the science equipment around you, while simultaneously forcing you to expose yourself to them. At best, you're told to visit a safety seminar. Afterwards, of course, or she points out the possibilities of injuries but glitches out before being able to tell you how to avoid them.
For your own safety and the safety of others, please refrain from...
And these warnings aren't for show either, as the tests really are incredibly life-threatening. Chambers are flooded with toxic fluids, energy pellets that will disintegrate your entire body bounce around everywhere, and live turrets are primed and ready to shoot anything on sight. If a member of OSHA was present, they'd have an aneurysm. But according to GLaDOS, this danger is intentional for testing, and she isn't lying when she says,
Please note that any appearance of danger is merely a device to enhance your testing experience.
So whether it's to measure how many liters of sweat someone can produce while being shot at by robots, or to see how long it takes for acid to dissolve human skin, I'm sure they're getting great results. But when she isn't telling you how unbelievably hard you're going to be dying within the next 5 seconds, GLaDOS just outright lies to you. Such as telling you that she will not be monitoring your performance in a certain test chamber, but then revealing she did it after all. Or claiming a certain test is impossible to solve while continuously reminding you of the fact that it is impossible to solve, while it's actually perfectly possible to solve. Another time she explains that one of the chambers has been replaced with a live fire course for the military, which is blatantly untrue as the turrets appear repeatedly afterwards. I mean, maybe it was a live fire course after all, but it sure makes for great testing material, doesn't it? A very extreme example is how she'll explain that the portal technology is perfectly safe at the beginning, But at the end, when you've already made use of it extensively, she gives a rather late disclaimer.
All subjects intending to handle high-energy gamma-leaking portal technology must be informed that they may be informed of applicable regulatory compliance issues.
And all of these lies get cranked up to the max in the final battle against GLaDOS, but we'll get to that later. She definitely likes to mess with your body and mind, however, which is perfectly demonstrated in the companion cube chamber. I'm sure you've already watched several videos on the subject, so I'll keep it brief. Basically, the entire test is not trying to find out how well someone can carry a box around, but rather to get them emotionally attached to it. I mean, you've used cubes before, but this one gets not only a special announcement, but also a name that screams, "I'm your friend." And GLaDOS pushes this further, saying it will accompany you and that you have to take care of it like it's your bestest buddy. She isn't even subtle about this either and directly states that she expects you to humanize it.
The symptoms most commonly produced by enrichment center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations.
Yet at the same time, she also attempts to trick you into believing that it might be able to communicate with you, saying it does not speak. No, really, it does not speak. Believe her, speaking is not what it is capable of. But if all that weren't enough, you are required to not only abandon your quote-unquote friend at the end, but to put it down. I'm not exaggerating, GLaDOS calls incinerating the cube euthanizing it. So not only does she want you to get attached to a lifeless object, she even wants you to feel really bad about killing it. This is further emphasized by the fact that the incinerator is on a timer, meaning you can't even rethink your decision or say a proper goodbye to your friend. You have to be fast about it. Something which GLaDOS will of course remind you of. So while you're breaking your head over trying to figure out how to solve all these puzzles, it's also being broken further via emotional and physical manipulation, making everything way harder than it really needs to be. But at the very least, you can escape all that torment in the end and live as a free person, making your own decisions for the first time, right? Right? What do you mean no? Of course you do, you might say. You managed to break out of the final test chamber, crawl behind the scenes a bit where GLaDOS has no power, and then you defeat her for good. Oh, I'm not doubting any of that happened. Just seems a little convenient, don't you think? Let's go through everything chronologically. You finish the final chamber, everything's great, then GLaDOS backstabs you and explains that your testing is over and you will be incinerated, while your platform slowly moves into a raging fire. And I mean slowly. The entire platform actually begins to move at half speed than before, giving you ample time to figure out a solution. Sure, that was definitely done so the player has enough time to decide what to do, but that doesn't mean it has no implications in the game. They could have also made the track a bit longer, but nope, the platform you're on just so happens to slow down for no apparent reason. Not only that, but all the walls in the room around you are surfaces that can have portals on them. Surely, for a room designed to get rid of all the evidence, you'd want to make sure that there is no possible way to escape? Heck, why even choose fire to begin with? You just came across a perfect way of disintegrating test subjects a second ago, namely those bouncing energy spheres. Those would have killed you instantly and without you being able to do anything about it. You could have also been dropped in toxic goo for the same effect. I doubt those would have damaged the portal gun too, considering you've experienced them several times before. So if it's too much of a risk to valuable equipment, why put them in the test chambers to begin with? Speaking of the portal gun, GLaDOS even points out how it's still perfectly functional, even under extreme heat, implying you can absolutely get out of the situation if you really wanted to. So I guess this line wasn't a lie then.
We are pleased that you made it through the final challenge where we pretended we were going to murder you.
And escaping the facility is pretty straightforward, wouldn't you agree? Sure, it's convenient how there are portal walls everywhere, even in areas not meant for testing. Fine, it might be some generic wall material that's easy to produce. Remember, Portal 2 doesn't exist yet. But it's also pretty damn convenient how someone wrote down specific instructions on how to escape around the place, a lot of which are only possible to follow if you happen to have a portal gun. And there are so many pipes and platforms broken in such a way that they allow you to perfectly proceed to the next room. If there's someone else behind the scenes who wants other test subjects to escape, this sure seems like a lot of work for them. And man, they sure perfectly calculated that this random cube tube would lead you directly to the exact room you needed to be in. Wouldn't want this crazy escape to be hindered by you getting lost, would we? You're even being given a rocket turret at the press of a button, precisely when you need it, right before the confrontation with GLaDOS where you'll have to use it against her. I'm glad that even in the most dire situations, you are still being given the exact tools you need and taught how to use them. And for an evil, backstabbing AI, GLaDOS is a very generous host, isn't she? Yes, she does try to kill you with neurotoxin. Slowly, over the course of 6 whole minutes. And just that you know the time left down to the exact second, she's even kind enough to display it around you on the walls. Why would she do that if she was trying to murder you? Okay, she also shoots rockets at you, that's pretty dangerous. But not much more dangerous than the aforementioned energy pellets, toxic goo and turrets that you encountered before all of this. GLaDOS also makes it rather obvious what you have to do in order to defeat her. Oh yeah, that definitely wasn't supposed to happen. Just a weird old coinky-dink. And she really doesn't want you to pick that thing up and chuck it into the nearby incinerator, no siree. Just leave it there and definitely do not touch it. Right, forgot to mention! The very absolutely convenient Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator, which just so happens to be the only object in the room that you can interact with. Weird how activating that is so easy, but actually getting the cores off of GLaDOS isn't. And it's on a timer? What, does Aperture lock their fire extinguishers too? But hey, maybe it's all just a weird coincidence. I mean, you came up with a plan on how to defeat her by yourself. It's not like she outright explains to you what you need to do.
Killing you and giving you good advice aren't mutually exclusive. The rocket really is the way to go.
Oh. Even with all this evidence presented, you're still skeptic? Why though? Portal is a game in which you wake up in a highly advanced science facility, are being given a gun which allows you to travel through space and time, all while being overseen by a giant robot AI, and this is where you draw the line? How do you even know it is all about the portals to begin with? You only have GLaDOS to go off of on that, and she's not the most reliable person. Everything you encounter, you have 0 ways of verifying whether it's real or not. Not the puzzles, not the rooms behind the puzzles, and not the hidden messages that tell you how to get there. You don't even have any backstory for how you arrived in this place. For all you know, you might have been drugged and taken there against your will, like in the movie Q. Even the story GLaDOS tells you about having flooded the enrichment center with neurotoxin, as well as all the empty inspection chambers and backstage rooms, might have just been world building, creating a scenario specifically to make you doubt everything. And here's a depressing truth. There have been experiments done in real life that were just as outlandish and unethical, perhaps even more so, where people were injected with diseases or exposed to radiation and chemicals, against their will and knowledge. The USA is no stranger to that at all. But just to remove any doubt from that mind of yours, GLaDOS herself even confirms the whole thing was a test, singing about how this was a triumph and how she's still alive in the credits. And as much as the game memed on it, the cake turns out to not be a lie after all either, again making you question whether this was real or not. The question that arises, however, is why? Why put test subjects through all of this? Well, for science, of course. To test not only how portals work and how people can use them to solve puzzles, but also to see how these types of 3D space shenanigans affect the human mind. Many experiments done in the real world involve subjects thinking they're doing one thing while being tested on another. Since it would skew results if they knew what was going on, they're essentially being thrown a red herring. And portals must be the biggest and reddest herring there is. There is no way your entire mind doesn't focus on this technological marvel of science, giving scientists ample opportunities to conduct other experiments on you at the same time. That's not to say that they didn't test the portals themselves, I'm absolutely sure they did. Of course they would, why wouldn't they? I'm just saying that they didn't do that with you specifically. However, I think there's another reason for all these tests, and they don't have anything to do with portals, or Aperture, or science in general. But they had everything to do with Chell. In the final battle, GLaDOS says this.
Things have changed since the last time you left the building. What's going on out there will make you wish you were back in here. I have an infinite capacity for knowledge, and even I'm not sure what's going on outside. All I know is I'm the only thing standing between us and them. Well, I was.
Well, what is going on out there? Who is they, and why is she the only thing between them and us? The Combine. Portal takes place in the same universe as Half-Life after all, probably a while after the 7-hour war that almost entirely destroyed Earth and enslaved the little remains of humanity left. GLaDOS knows this. She doesn't understand it, but she knows it. but what she might understand is that humanity can still rise up against the Combine. Perhaps because a theoretical physicist happened to re-emerge out of nowhere and began his own conquest against them. And it was perhaps this that sparked GLaDOS to send some assistance of her own. And who would be more of a help than someone who knows how to use a portal gun? So maybe all of the extreme danger and the fight against GLaDOS were just her way of preparing Chell to rise up against a greater foe, in order to save humanity together with Gordon Freeman. Now, here's a few disclaimers. Firstly, a lot of these things, like streamlining your escape and teaching certain game mechanics, were done first and foremost for the sake of gameplay. But that doesn't mean they can't be interpreted in other ways. After all, Gordon is made out to be a hero who forges his path through unstoppable foes, but literally all of his games are the most linear they could ever be. Secondly, a lot of this obviously got retconned in Portal 2, like I said in the beginning. You get dragged back into Aperture at the end, so your escape wasn't actually intended. Valve also created Ratman as a character who is apparently behind all the wall scribbles and hidden rooms. He didn't help you for the sake of science or to prepare you to face the Combine, but just so you could defeat GLaDOS and escape. In fact, it was because of him that you woke up in the test chamber to begin with. Furthermore, GLaDOS really was a monster and flooded the Enrichment Center with neurotoxin, twice even, and she never brings the Combine up ever again either, nor that she was preparing you for them. She does let you go at the end of Portal 2, but this time it's more of an actual reward, since she also brings the companion cube back for you. Though I feel to a certain extent, some things could still be possible even knowing what we learned in Portal 2. Messing around with the minds of test subjects instead of testing portals isn't just possible, it's very likely, considering Aperture's approach to science. And perhaps GLaDOS didn't create Ratman's messages, but she might have just not removed them, because she knew they would help Chell. So perhaps, for one reason or another, she wanted her to escape after all. Whether it was to defeat the Combine or just because the two share a closer bond, we don't know. All in all, I think that Portal 1 just isn't as straightforward as it makes you believe. And not just that, but that even when you think you've got it all figured out, it already knew this long in advance. But what does this mean for us, as players? Nothing. Not every video is immoral, you know? Still, would love to hear your thoughts on this theory. I'd also be eager to hear if you have any theories of your own, so just leave those in the comments below. I'd love to read them all. But for now, that's it. There's nothing more to this video. It's not like it was an experiment to see how much of your time I can waste before you catch on. Whoops.